She was the widow of a hotel magnate. He was the heir to a South Florida empire. But in just 3 months, both were found dead. The story of Bernice and Ben Novack Jr. is one of wealth, jealousy, and a chilling plan that took years to unravel.
Novack Sr., founder of the famed Fontainebleau Hotel. She held her place in Miami's elite. Her son, Ben Novack Jr., had followed in his father's footsteps. He built a business empire of his own, one filled with conventions, toys, and luxury. Ben Jr. was flashy. Known for his Batman collection and wealth, he lived life big. But behind closed doors, his marriage to Narcy Novack was crumbling. Narcy, a former stripper from Ecuador, had married into the fortune. But she never quite fit the high society image. She was jealous, controlling, and she feared that Ben was preparing to leave her. Meanwhile, Bernice, his mother, had a sharp intuition. She reportedly didn't trust Narcy and had suspicions about her true intentions. In April 2009, Bernice was found dead in her home. Authorities initially thought it was an accident. She had facial injuries consistent with a fall, and the scene suggested a tragic misstep. But there were whispers. Some in the family felt uneasy. The timing felt off. Still, there wasn't enough to open a full investigation. Bernice was laid to rest, and life moved forward until it didn't. In July 2009, just 3 months later, Ben Novack Jr. was found dead in a hotel room. The scene was grisly. He had been bound, beaten, and suffocated. This time, police weren't willing to dismiss the clues. The murder seemed personal, intimate. Suspicion immediately fell on Narcy. She had been at the hotel the night of his death. She claimed to have found his body, but her story didn't hold up. As detectives started digging, a web of lies and betrayal began to unravel. Investigators soon discovered that Narcy wasn't alone in her anger. She believed Ben was having an affair, and she wasn't wrong. Ben had a longtime mistress, and sources say he was planning to leave Narcy for good. He had also updated his will, reportedly cutting Narcy out of his estate. That decision may have sealed his fate. Prosecutors later revealed that Narcy and her brother, Cristobal Veliz, had orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot. They hired hitmen promising them money and protection to kill both Bernice and Ben. The plan was methodical. Bernice was eliminated first to ensure Narcy would inherit everything through Ben. Once Bernice was gone, Narcy believed Ben's assets would become easier to control. But Narcy didn't want a divorce. She didn't want half. She wanted it all. With Bernice dead, the next step was Ben himself. Police traced phone calls, bank transactions, and movements that connected Narcy and Cristobal to the hired killers. The hitmen confessed. They detailed how they were paid and how the plan unfolded. One of them described how Ben begged for his life. The confessions were chilling and damning. Narcy maintained her innocence. She said the men acted alone. Bet she was set up. But the evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance, phone logs, and witness testimony painted a clear picture. Narcy and Cristobal had plotted everything. The courtroom was packed when Narcy Novack stood trial in 2012. The press called it the Hotel Heiress murder case. The prosecution laid out the timeline. From Bernice's death to Ben's murder, the plan had been crafted with precision. Testimony from the hitman shocked the jury. So did Narcy's calm demeanor throughout the trial. They said Narcy promised them cash and protection, that she described exactly how and when to strike. Ben's mistress testified too. She described the fear Ben had in his final days, how he knew something was coming. Financial records showed that Narcy had gone on a spending spree after Bernice's death. She withdrew large sums of cash. She contacted attorneys about the estate, and she reportedly told one person, "He'll never leave me. I'll kill him first." Cristobal's trial ran alongside hers. Prosecutors portrayed him as the enforcer. He handled logistics, payments, and kept the hitman in line. The jury took days to deliberate. The stakes were high, and the story was complex. But in the end, both Narcy and Cristobal were found guilty. The sentence? Life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Narcy showed no emotion when the verdict was read. Cristobal stared straight ahead. It was over. But the damage was done. The murders of Bernice and Ben Novack Jr. left a void in the South Florida community. The Fontainebleau legacy, once built on glamour and success, was now stained by blood. Friends remembered Bernice as elegant, sharp, and fiercely protective of her family. Ben Jr. was seen as eccentric but generous. His Batman obsession made headlines, but his business acumen kept him respected. The estate was left in legal limbo. With Narcy convicted, the will was contested and control shifted. Ben's mistress, along with surviving family, sought closure in court and the press. The case raised awareness about elder abuse, financial coercion, and manipulation within wealthy families. Books and documentaries followed. The story was too surreal to ignore. It became a true crime staple: wealth, betrayal, and greed, all ending in tragedy. Narcy remains in federal prison. She continues to deny her role. Cristobal has remained largely silent since the conviction. The hitmen, having cooperated, received reduced sentences. The Novack name, once associated with Miami's luxury and hospitality, now echoes through courtrooms and prison records. The story isn't just about crime. It's about the slow rot of trust and the high cost of silence. To this day, people still ask, could it have been prevented? The answer lies in the shadows of wealth, where love turns to fear and loyalty to motive. The Novack murders remain a haunting reminder that appearances can be deadly illusions.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking into a story that honestly feels like something out of a movie, but it's grimly real. It involves a well-known family, huge wealth, and 2 deaths that happened under very, very suspicious circumstances, chillingly close together, too.
It really is a complex and tragic case. The source we're digging into today for you is the Wikipedia article covering the murders of Bernice and Ben Novack Jr.
Exactly. So our goal here is to unpack the key events, the people involved, the alleged motives, the legal battles, basically everything presented in this source to give you a really clear picture of what went down.
And the main players you need to keep in mind are Bernice Novack, the mother, her son Ben Novack Jr., the heir, and then Narcy Novack, who was Ben Jr.'s estranged wife.
Okay, let's get into it. Where does the story really begin?
Well, it starts with the family's background, kind of setting the stage. The fortune comes from Ben Novack Sr., the man who built the famous Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami Beach. He died back in '85.
Right, iconic place.
Yeah. His wife was Bernice Novack, born way back in 1921. And their son, Ben Novack Jr., born around '56, he was the one set to inherit, this pretty significant multi-million-dollar estate.
Got it. But things take a dark turn starting in 2009.
That's right. The first major event described in the article is Bernice Novack's death. April 5th, 2009. She's found dead. She was 87 years old, found in the garage of her home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Okay, and here's where it gets, well, strange, right? Because initially, they didn't think it was murder.
No, not at all. The initial finding, according to the article, was that it was an accidental fall, like she tripped getting out of her car in the garage. Seemed plausible, I suppose.
Seemed plausible then. But that ruling didn't stick, did it?
Not for long, and this is crucial. The article makes it clear that this initial ruling was overturned later, specifically after her son Ben Jr. died. A new police investigation looked back at her death and concluded it wasn't an accident, it was actually a homicide.
Wow. Okay, so that retroactive finding hangs over everything that happens next, which is just 3 months later.
Exactly, 3 months. Morning of July 12, 2009. Ben Novack Jr. himself is found dead. He was 53.
And not just dead, but murdered violently. Where did this happen?
He was in the penthouse suite of the Hilton Hotel in Rye Brook, New York. And the way he died, it's described as incredibly brutal. He was bludgeoned and suffocated.
The specifics in the article are really disturbing. It mentions he was bound with duct tape.
Yeah, and his eyes.
Whoa.
His eyes were gouged out. Just horrific detail.
Truly awful. The article also adds a bit of context about his life. Then mentions he was having an affair, right? With an actress.
Yes, Rebecca E. Bliss. And of course, the fact that he was the heir to this huge estate is always sort of hanging in the background of these events.
So, okay, we have the mother's death, first called an accident, later a homicide. Then the son, brutally murdered months later. The police must have started seeing a connection pretty quickly.
You'd have to think so. And it seems they did. The investigation eventually led to arrests, though it took about a year.
Who was arrested?
The article states that Narcy Novack, Ben Jr.'s estranged wife, living down in Fort Lauderdale, she was arrested in July 2010. And importantly, she was arrested for both murders, her mother-in-law's and her husband's.
Both. Wow. Was she acting alone, according to the allegations?
No, the article says the investigation pointed to others being involved. Her brother, Cristobal Valise, was also accused.
Okay, her brother too.
And it goes further. Valise was accused of actually, hiring other people. 3 names are mentioned: Alejandro Gutierrez Garcia, Joel Gonzalez, and Dennis Ramirez. The accusation was that Valise enlisted these guys to help carry out both killings.
So the allegation is a full-blown conspiracy, connecting both deaths directly.
Exactly. That alleged link, that these weren't separate incidents, but part of one plan allegedly orchestrated by Narcy and her brother, that becomes absolutely central to the case.
Which brings us to the trial. Narcy and her brother Valise, they were tried together.
Yes, in 2012, federal court, White Plains, New York. And this is where you get these really starkly different stories about what happened presented to the jury.
Let's hear the prosecution side first. What did they say drove Narcy?
Well, according to the article, the prosecution painted a picture of a woman motivated by a few things. One was fear that Ben Jr. was going to leave her for his mistress, Rebecca Bliss.
Okay, the affair.
Right. But the other big driver, maybe the main one they argued, was money. Pure finances. There was apparently a prenup.
Ah, the prenup. How much would she have gotten?
The article says it would have only left her about $65,000 if they divorced, compared to inheriting the bulk of his multi-million-dollar estate if he died while they were still married.
$65,000 versus millions. That's a big
A
difference.
huge difference. The prosecution, the article says, basically summed up her alleged motives as hatred, greed, and vengeance. Pretty blunt.
Very blunt. So how did the defense respond to that? They must have had a counter-narrative.
Oh, they did, and it was quite something. According to the article, their strategy was to point the finger elsewhere entirely. They blamed Narcy's own daughter from a previous marriage, Mayabed.
Wait, they blamed the daughter. Narcy's daughter.
Yes. They argued that Mayabad was the one who orchestrated the murders.
Okay, but why? What was her alleged motive, according to the defense?
Same thing, really money. The defense claims she wanted to get her hands on Ben Novack Jr.'s estate, and the article even notes they specifically brought up that large collection of Batman memorabilia he owned as part of what Mayabad was supposedly after.
The Batman collection again. So the defense is saying the daughter framed her own mother and uncle to inherit the fortune, including the Batmobiles or whatever.
That seems to be the gist of their argument, based on the article. A pretty dramatic accusation to make in court.
Absolutely. So you have these two completely opposing stories. How did the trial end? What was the verdict?
The article states clearly, both Narcy Novack and her brother, Cristobal Valise, were convicted.
Convicted on what charges exactly?
A whole list. Murder, obviously. Conspiracy to commit murder. but also things like domestic violence and stalking, which maybe speaks to the relationship issues alleged by the prosecution, and financial crimes too, like money laundering and witness tampering, suggests, alleged attempts to cover things up.
Serious charges. What about the sentences?
Life in prison for both of them, without the possibility of parole.
Life without parole. And the article mentioned something about Narcy not being there for the verdict.
Yeah, kind of a striking detail. It says she waived her right to appear in court for both the guilty verdict and for her sentencing hearing later on.
And what about the other men? The ones Veliz allegedly hired?
Gutierrez, Garcia, Gonzalez, and Ramirez. The article says they all pleaded guilty, but to lesser charges.
Okay. So Narcy's convicted of murdering her husband. What does that mean for the inheritance? Does she still get the millions?
No, and this is where a legal principle called the Slayer Rule comes in, which the article mentions. Basically, the law says you can't profit from killing someone.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so because she was convicted of his murder, Narcy was legally barred from inheriting any part of Ben Jr.'s estate.
So that $4.2 million estate, including the Batman stuff, where does it go?
According to the article, it's expected to go to Ben Novack Jr.'s daughter, Mayabad, yes, the same daughter the defense accused, and also to Mayabad's 2 sons, so Ben Jr.'s grandsons.
Wow. The person the defense tried to pin it on ends up inheriting. That's quite an outcome.
It really is.
Now, with a story like this, family fortune, secrets, brutal murders, a trial with twists, it's no wonder the media went wild with it.
Absolutely. The article lists a whole bunch of shows that covered it. Big true crime shows like 48 Hours, Dateline NBC, Snapped.
I remember seeing some of those.
Yeah, and others too, like Deadly Rich, My Dirty Little Secret, True Crime with Aphrodite Jones, Dying to Belong. It clearly captured a lot of attention.
And it even got the Hollywood treatment, didn't it?
It did. The article mentions a 2015 Lifetime movie called Beautiful and Twisted. Had some big names in it. Rob Lowe played Ben Jr., Paz Vega played Narcy, and Candice Bergen played Bernice.
Right. That just shows you how much this case resonated, or maybe horrified, the public.
Definitely. So looking back at the whole thing through the lens of this source, we started with the death, Bernice's, that looked like an accident.
But wasn't it?
But wasn't. Then comes this incredibly violent murder of her son, Ben Jr., which triggers this deeper look, uncovering an alleged plot involving his wife and her brother.
Driven by, according to the prosecution, things like greed, hatred, maybe fear, leading to these life sentences.
And the inheritance ultimately going down a path nobody might have expected at the start.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? How initial reports or assumptions can be so wrong, and how digging deeper can reveal these incredibly complex and dark motivations.
Absolutely, and it really makes you think, doesn't it? Just consider how Bernice Novack's death might have stayed on the books as an accident forever if her son hadn't also been murdered just a few months later. That second tragedy was the catalyst, according to the article's narrative, that unraveled the alleged truth about both deaths, suggesting this wasn't random misfortune, but potentially a calculated plan.